Welcome back to Hardball. The Justice Department is investigating whether WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange broke the law when he published thousands of State Department cables that exposed confidential discussions among diplomats. But the possibility of legal action does not seem to be deterring Assange. He says he has documents that could take down a big American bank and will release them early next year. For more on the revelations from these State Department cables and what it means for our foreign policy interests, let's turn to former State Department spokesman Jamie Rubin and also to Washington Post columnist and MSNBC political analyst Eugene Robinson. Jamie, thanks for joining us, and thank you for joining us, Gene. This big question here, can we stop this kind of behavior, this leaking and publicizing over the Internet of very sensitive material that embarrasses us with the law? Is the law any help here? Jamie.
Probably not. I think someone like Mr. Assange is not going to be deterred by legal action. Look, the law was the private in the military who was aware of the law when he stole this information and passed it on to what is essentially a fence operation of Mr. Assange, and I doubt they're going to be deterred by this. The damage, ironically, that's been done here is to the very way of doing business that those on the hard left would prefer, diplomacy, rather than the military operations of the Pentagon or the sanctions of the Treasury Department. Diplomats are in the business of trying to resolve disputes peacefully, and they're the ones who have been cut off at the knees by this.
Well, Jamie, what is the hard left here all about? I'm fairly familiar with politics, but I don't get the angle here. What does this guy Assange out of Australia seek to do besides create chaos in the West? What's his angle? What's his enemy?
Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I can suspect that he started off in the anti-war mode, trying to prove through Afghanistan cables and Iraq cables that these wars were a mistake and needed to be understood better by the American public, and then they would drop their support for them. But from transferring that issue to broad American foreign policy, to the U.S. government's daily operations, he's become an anti-American anarchist of some kind.
I want to ask Gene the same question. Ideologically, we love that on this show, finding out where people are coming from. Where's this guy coming from, and are there going to be more of it? It sounds like this is the beginning of something, not the end of it.
Well, it does sound like the beginning, Chris. I don't know where to put him on a kind of left-to-right continuum. I'm not sure he fits into that traditional spectrum. I think Jamie is right. Put him off to the side or on a third axis, maybe, as essentially an anarchist or somebody who he doesn't fit a traditional left profile in my view.
Well, here he is going after the Secretary of State. He told Time that Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, quote, should resign if it can be shown that she was responsible for ordering U.S. diplomatic figures to engage in espionage in the U.N. in violation of the international covenants to which the U.S. has signed up. Jamie, you worked at the State Department. You made your name there so well. It sounds like he's got a bee in his bonnet, a target of Hillary Clinton, who to me is somewhere center-left, hardly an ideological figure. What is he after here?
Well, I say left earlier because I think that the supporters of Mr. Assange, certainly Rolling Stone journalist Michael Hastings and Daniel Ellsberg, who have been supporting what he's doing, come from the, far left who are opposing U.S. foreign policy across the board. Diplomats and spying have been an issue that's gone back to the Middle Ages and the early American Revolution. They were all trying to read each other's cables and treaties. The irony here is that as a result of openness over the last hundreds of years, there are no great revelations. After Watergate, after Vietnam and the Pentagon Papers, we learned that the private American policy is much like the public American policy, not perhaps for the leaders in the Arab world where their democratic values are a little weaker.
Yeah, I love that, Gene Robinson. You and I think a lot alike, and I think I can say there was some assurance. And I was impressed that John Podhoretz, who's sort of a mild neoconservative, was praising the information coming out. He's saying that this shows the United States is basically honest, candid, serious, and sort of the good guy in the world, where the rest of the world is just playing games in terms of what they're up to.
Yeah, I think it does. I mean, what's striking to me about what's come out so far, the cables that have come out so far, is that they are entirely consistent with what we understood U.S. policy to be, and there has been nothing, really even duplicitous, and duplicity, frankly, is part of diplomacy. My colleague Ann Applebaum had a fascinating column this morning in which she was kind of trying to figure out where Assange is coming from, and saying, there are places where there are real secrets to be uncovered. There are regimes that don't have sunshine laws, like the regime in China, for example, and asked, will he go as aggressively after those kinds of documents?
How do I know he won't? Thank you, Jamie Rubin. Thank you, Mr. Secretary, and thank you, Eugene Robinson, for joining us.